of Australia are impacted by salt, and so people naturally go out to drain the salt away to fix the problem. But what does that do? That allows for the ingress of more salty water. And that salty water is nutrients leaking out of your landscape, and that's the big problem. You don't want to be losing nutrients out of your landscape. So in Australia, are high water tables in farming systems beneficial or detrimental? They're beneficial when managed correctly. We all know that if you've got a high water table, it will make your system much harder if you're running a grazing operation or a cropping operation. If your landscape's too wet, it's going to be very difficult to run that operation. So managing that water table is what's critical. Can you name the 4 basic functions of plants? They're solar-powered air conditioners, solar-powered factories, solar-powered pumps, solar-powered soil carbon builders. Now that's just the simple components, and is that just the plants you want? Is that just the grass? Or is that every green plant that you have in your landscape? Is every green plant you have in the landscape are carrying out these processes? And they're important. Can you identify the natural landscape progression in all Earth's ecosystems? Everything moves from a high point to a low point. So if you think about, you want to go out, you're looking at your landscape and you want to start fixing how it functions. Where do you start? Where did you see PA, if anybody saw Australian Story, where did you see him working in that show? Does anyone remember? He was working in the creeks. He's known as the maverick that puts rocks and logs and so forth in the creek. Well, whereabouts is the creek? It's actually the lowest part of your landscape. But all landscapes build from a high point to a low point. So where should you work? You should work as high up in the landscape as feasibly possible, because everything you do up there will have an impact on everything below. If you work at the bottom of your landscape, you're going to do something for somebody else further down, which is a good thing. But if you're thinking about how productive you're going to be, it's not going to necessarily help with that. So finally, what's the numerical value of the carbon-nitrogen ratio of Australian soils, and why is it important? It's anywhere from 9 to 1 up to 30 to 1. Don't worry about the number. It's about what happens if you get that ratio out. You get that ratio out, it determines a whole lot of different plants coming into the system to manage the extra nitrates in your system, which may not necessarily be plants that you want in your production system. So maintaining that carbon to nitrogen balance is quite critical. So natural sequence farming, what is it? We talk about these 3 areas: an accumulation area, a production area, and a filtration area. Where do you think the accumulation area might be? Whereabouts in the landscape? Up the top? Yep, up the top. Everything that happens up there is going to move down, so your production area sits below that. And what should we have at the bottom of our system? A filtration system. So many places today don't have wetlands functioning anymore. So there's nothing filtering our losses, which means our losses go out to sea. Now that could be sediment, worst case scenario. The very least, it could be nutrients leaving your farm, which is not there now to grow the next round of plants. So it's critical that you filter that so you get to keep it on your property. Yep. So NSF's the ability to read the landscape and see and understand these patterns and processes. The key being, and this is something that's really important, that plants built this landscape. None of what we're talking about, no one was out there building contours and ponds before we got here. That was all run by plants. So you would ask, well, why do we bother? Why do we need to go out and do this stuff today? Because we had a lack of understanding, our landscape has now changed to the point where water predominantly is running off of our landscape. Where once upon a time that water was held in the landscape. And only when the landscape was full did the water run off. Today, most of the places that I go to, the water runs first. That means you're losing straight away. So we need to do something to change that. So we hold the water on there and then the plants can take over. We summarise this in our 5 pillars. Slow the flow, let all plants grow, careful where the animals go, filtration's a must-know, and return to the top to recycle the lot, which Hamish spoke about earlier. So slowing the flow, what could you do? Well, obviously maintaining good plant cover. You guys, I'm sure, are all really good graziers and you're maintaining good ground cover, so that's going to help slow that movement of the water. What else could we do? What if we've got situations where you've got a gully or land that's above that you have no ability to do anything about, and that water runs through your place? Do you think that would be carrying beneficial nutrients? Yep, more than likely it would. Once upon a time, that water would have been spread out across the landscape. Today, we have incised gullies, and the water stays in the incised gully, never gets out onto the landscape. So you've never got a chance to filter it. Where if you can get some of that water out on the landscape, you can now filter it with the plants that you've got growing out there. So that's more added fertility you're keeping on your landscape as a benefit. Yep. So let all plants grow. Well, this one tends to be, I guess, a little bit controversial because people don't like weeds, do they? And a lot of the time, I think PA's always promoted that you need to have these weeds on there. I think he does that because he likes to stir people up, because he knows how people get a little bit upset about these weeds, so he likes to talk about the weeds and how you must have weeds in there. But the weeds are indicators as to the condition of your landscape. They are messengers. They are there to send you a message about what's going on. It's your job to understand the message that those plants are sending you and act accordingly. Let's say those plants are saying to you, this landscape's dry. So what do you need to do? Hold more water. What if there's a nutrient that's missing? Those plants are coming in to recover that nutrient. So all of these things are just messages for you. They're not there just to annoy you. They're there to send you a message. Yep. So careful where the animals go. The Australian landscape didn't evolve with the animals that we use in our production systems today. So there are some parts of our landscape that are sensitive to those animals. If you've got somewhere where water is being slowed and you're not managing your animals around that area, they could change the way that piece of landscape manages water. So if we understand that there's sensitive areas and we manage our animals accordingly around those areas. Yep. It's as simple as that. So filtration. We want to be able to have filtering areas. So wetlands, we put in contours, and the contours act like filters across the landscape. So any fertility that happens to move, you've got an ability now to capture that in a contour system so it doesn't run off of your place. See, the thing is that a lot of people are starting to focus on water, and they can see that holding water on their landscape is something that's quite important. But what they don't think about are the nutrients that go with the water. Because it will rain again. You will get water come back onto your landscape, but you never get the fertility back. That's gone. Remember that water is the vehicle moving everything around your place, including the fertility. So you want to be able to, if you manage the water, you then manage how the fertility moves, whether it be in a positive or negative way. So return to the top to recycle the lot. That's about if the fertility is moving, if we recognise water moves it, gravity is the energy that's pushing it, and that fertility moves somewhere down into our system, we need to figure out a way how we can get that transferred back to the top. That means our fertility is going around and around, our water's moving around and around, and you don't require inputs from anywhere else. Now you think about how did that happen in the past? How did this landscape evolve? Well, what about birds feeding in those low areas where it was wet? And at night time they would migrate back up to the trees at the top of the hill. What do they do when they go to the top of the hill? They poop. All of a sudden you've got this fertility moving around and around. But in our wisdom, for production systems, we cut down the trees and we remove the wetlands. No more birds. So the whole loop has been broken. So how can you use your production system to replicate that? Well, if you're running cattle, you can use the cattle to move some of that fertility. You just think about how you could fit that in to your production system to get them to do that. It doesn't mean you're moving your cattle from the bottom of your place 10 kilometres to the top of the hill. The high point could be a high point in that paddock. So if you had water, a water point there, the animals are going to be naturally drawn to the water point. You have shade there, you have lick there. All of these things that can help set your place up so that the animals are moving fertility for you at a free cost. So our landscapes were naturally self-sustaining, designed in such a way that it was capable of sustaining itself over periods of both dry and wet for millions of years. This is the part I think that we've now got that's not functioning. Our landscape built by itself, and it can do it again. We just have to put back into place the processes so it's able to do that. So we want to manage the losses of water, the losses of energy and the losses of matter, all due to gravity. How many people in the room have ever thought about gravity in your production system? Not many. We don't think about it, do we? These are the simple parts we don't think about. We just take it for granted. But we want to think about the fact that gravity is moving everything. We now have to work out how do we work with gravity to get it to work for us. So what could you do? Well, you could move water and nutrients sideways across your landscape so that gravity now moves that down through your landscape. Do you think that would be positive? Yep, certainly would be. So water is the basis for all life on Earth, energy from the sun drives all life on Earth, and carbon is the building blocks for all living things on Earth. How many of you guys have been told that carbon is a problem? How many people believe that carbon's a problem? No hands. Well, you'd all be right then, wouldn't you? Because carbon is essential. All of us are made of carbon. So the whole stink about carbon is how do we utilise that and how do we recycle it? You do it every day. In your grazing operations, you are recycling carbon all the time. And that's exactly what has to happen. We require it for life. So PA says the best solution for major climate recovery has been with us from the very beginning. What does he mean by that? He means that all the answers are in the Australian landscape. He's always maintained that the Australian landscape holds the key to rehabilitate landscapes across the world because it evolved under a system that was quite dramatic. As it's known, it's the land of droughts and flooding rains. So it went through these cycles all the time, but it came out the other side in a better condition. What the questions we need to ask is, how did it do that? If we understand that and we put that into our farming systems, then we've got a system that is very resilient. So this is nature's way of managing water. Builds these little contours. I'm sure you've all seen these, probably on your cattle pads or whatever. You'll see these little structures built in there, and it's trying to pond up and slow down the speed of water once it starts moving. Well, I mean, the key would be obviously to maintain good ground cover so your water isn't moving, but that doesn't always happen. So what does nature do to manage it? So it builds those. See this one here? So what do you look at when you see that photo? What's happening? How much is the water moving? Behind that little organic matter strip, the water is now ponding, isn't it? What's the thing that was moving the water before it built that little organic matter? What was that energy? Gravity. So gravity was moving the water. Has gravity gone? No. So what's it doing to the water now? It's pushing it into the ground. So now, when the water was running off, gravity was moving it that way. As soon as it was stopped, it's now taking it